Welcome, my soft-thinking listener. You've found yourself in the company of the Sleepy Sloth once again. A slow, scientifically minded fellow, who enjoys facts, ancient measures of length and capacity, and things that no one today truly needs to know. I must tell you something before we begin. Today, I consider myself a scientist in the obscure realm of cubits, khets, hins and other forgotten measurements. A scientist wannabe who is almost always correct, except for those few little times when I am not. But even then, I prefer to drift gently onward, rather than fuss over it. Because what truly matters is the information itself. Before I start, please, let me know, what is the most boring thing you would secretly love hearing about? Let me know gently, in the comments. Now, let us begin today's episode of Ancient Egyptian Units of Measurement. The cubit, around 3000 BC, was not invented for excitement, but for gentle precision. It was measured from the tip of a man's middle finger to the bend of his elbow, a length that varied from person to person, but was eventually standardized in Egypt into what became known as the royal cubit, approximately 52.3 centimeters. Imagine the stoneworkers, the bricklayers, the quiet scribes, all using this body-based length to define the world around them, to build walls, to measure doors, to ensure that the blocks of temples and pyramids fitted together with reliable sameness. The cubit rod, carved carefully from wood, ivory, or stone, bore subdivisions marked by notches, representing palms and digits, allowing builders to measure not only whole cubits but smaller increments. To think of it, this was not just a length, but a rhythm of construction, a slow beating heart of measurement. And yet, it was so ordinary. A forearm. Nothing more. And yet everything in a world of ordered building. No one asked for this detail. But here it rests, like a quiet stone in the sand. Then let us drift to around 2900 BC, where the Khet made its slow entrance. The Khet was exactly 100 cubits, extending the reach of that forearm-based unit into the domain of surveying and the broad expanses of agricultural fields. Picture the Egyptian plain, bordered by the Nile, endlessly flooding and retreating, and the scribes tasked with measuring out farmland for fair taxation and planting. The Khet stretched into about 52.3 meters, a length that might seem unwieldy, but when laid out with ropes knotted at intervals, it became a tool of order among chaos. These rope stretchers, as they were called, walked slowly across the land, aligning, adjusting, and restoring boundaries erased by the Nile's annual gift. Every knot was deliberate, every step measured with calm assurance. 100 cubits made 1 khet, and 10 khets made a more expansive measure still. So the cubit became a khet, and the khet became the language of land. And in its dullness, we find a remarkable steadiness, as if even the earth itself needed to be lulled into calm divisions. But first, a soft little detour into liquid, the hin of around 2800 BC. Unlike the cubit and khet, which measured solid spaces, the hin belonged to vessels, to pouring, to the slow flow of oil or wine. It was about half a liter, perhaps just enough to fill a modest jug. The hin was mentioned in temple offerings, in cooking instructions, in trade accounts, all described in a language of volumes we rarely use today. A priest might pour a hin of oil for an offering flame, or a cook might measure a hin of honey into a mixture. This was no grand amphora, no dramatic barrel, but a soft and humble serving of liquid, nestled into daily ritual. The Egyptians divided the hin into smaller fractions, like the hekat and row, allowing even more delicate measures, each one as careful and unhurried as the last. Imagine a hand tipping a jar, watching the slow stream of oil, careful not to exceed the measure. There is nothing exciting here. Nothing at all. And yet, it is quietly satisfying, like watching water rise slowly in a narrow glass. Softly now, let us drift into the measure known as the hekat, first recorded around 2700 BC in ancient Egypt, a unit designed not for the grandeur of temples or the mapping of farmlands, but for the far gentler act of counting grain, barley, and other dry goods. The hekot was about 4.8 liters in modern terms, and it held a kind of quiet presence in the lives of both farmers and administrators, ensuring that offerings, wages, and supplies could be counted with precision. Imagine a jar, shaped carefully, filled to the brim with barley kernels, each kernel small and insignificant, but together forming a measure that was binding in law and religion alike. The hekot was divided into fractions, such as the row, which was a tiny subdivision, allowing scribes to record not only large amounts but also the most delicate of portions. This attention to fractions, to dividing grain into measurable, legal parts, shows us a society deeply entwined with order, where food and sustenance had to be accounted for in quiet rows of numbers. The system was not just practical, it was ceremonial, mentioned in tomb texts, in offering lists, in instructions for temple rituals, each time reminding us that measurement was not merely about trade but about cosmic balance. To hold a hekot of grain was to hold a small fragment of order in a world governed by the Nile's rhythm. One can almost see the hands pouring grain slowly into vessels, listening to the soft sound of kernels falling, until the measure is complete, exact, and quietly unremarkable in its perfect dullness. And yet, as with so many things, its stillness is what makes it so soothing. As we flow onward, let us pause upon the deben, which appeared in ancient Egypt around 2600 BC, a unit of weight designed for the most practical of exchanges, metals, copper, silver, and later gold. The deben was not fixed entirely at one single standard, but it often equaled around 91 grams, the weight of a small, dense object resting in one's palm. This unit formed the backbone of trade, where objects had value not by arbitrary declaration but by measurable weight. Picture a careful merchant, weighing out copper ingots against a stone balance, recording in quiet ink how many deben were owed or exchanged. There was no coinage yet, no minted currency, and so the deben was both weight and wealth, a measure that tethered value to tangible mass. In texts, we find mentions of 10 deben of copper, or 2 deben of gold, slowly exchanged in contracts and accounts, each number reflecting a physical substance that could be held, touched, weighed again if needed. The deben traveled in everyday life, in temple records, in markets, a silent partner in transactions. Even its divisions, smaller units that allowed fractions of a deben to be recorded, showed a care for accuracy, an unwillingness to let ambiguity slip into trade. There is something hushed about this, the way value rested not in symbols but in weight itself, in the balance beam gently swaying until it stilled, declaring that both sides had reached equality. No rush, no drama, just the unhurried settling of mass upon mass, as dependable as gravity itself. And now, with tender slowness, let us wander from the Nile's plains to the stone tracks of ancient Greece, around 2500 BC, where the stadion came into being as a measure of length. About 600 Greek feet in scale, though the exact value shifted slightly between regions, the stadion was more than a line in the soil, it was the length of the racecourse, the defining boundary of athletic contests in early Greece. A single stadion race was a sprint from one end of the track to the other, a distance both symbolic and measurable, binding together architecture, sport, and language. From this simple unit, the very word stadium would later emerge, carrying the echo of these early measures into modern speech. But at its heart, the stadion was just a stretch of ground, measured carefully, paced out with feet, and recorded as the standard for contests. Different city-states adjusted the stadion slightly, sometimes around 177 meters, sometimes nearer to 192 meters, but the essence remained the same. It was the human body stretched forward in measured repetition, multiplied until 600 steps had been reached. The stadion connected math to motion, numbers to footsteps, transforming length into lived experience. One might imagine an ancient surveyor, counting slowly, marking each pace with a stick, until the full measure was reached, to be etched into the earth as a track. No matter the noise of the crowd that later filled such spaces, at its origin the station was quiet, an agreement upon a distance, an acceptance of length as a shared truth. And so, like the cubit, the khet, the hekot, and the deben, it whispered order into human life, not in excitement, but in the calm certainty of distance known and repeated. Gently now, let us wander into the soft measure of the span, spoken of around 2400 BCE in the land of Sumer, where numbers and lengths were still rooted closely in the shapes of human bodies. The span was the distance from the tip of the thumb to the tip of the little finger when the hand was outstretched, a length both intimate and imprecise, yet surprisingly useful in everyday life. Imagine a Sumerian artisan, stretching out his hand across a piece of wood or clay, marking off the distance without tools, only with the body he carried. A span, in most modern approximations, reached around 22 to 23 centimeters, though no two hands would have matched exactly, making it a measure that was personal yet widely understood. In trade, in craft, in describing lengths of textiles or reeds, the span was a measure that passed silently from hand to hand, as natural as breathing. And it connected deeply to the human rhythm of work, where measurement was not yet divorced from the body but flowed gently out of it. There is something dreamlike in this. The idea that an entire world could be measured with nothing more than the reach of one's fingers, a reminder of how close measurement once lay to human touch. Even when standardized systems later emerged, the span lingered, a relic of simplicity, a gesture of hand against hand, as if the body itself whispered, "This much. And no more." With slow steps, let us drift toward the shekel, around 2300 BCE in Mesopotamia, where weight became the language of value, and silver was its chosen medium. The shekel, in its earliest form, was not a coin but a weight, around 8 to 9 grams of silver, carefully balanced on scales. To trade in shekels meant to trade in measurable metal, not abstract numbers, but a physical mass that could be held, weighed, and tested again. Merchants in bustling markets would set their silver against stones of known shekel weight, adjusting until balance was achieved, the beam rocking gently before it came to rest. The shekel's smallness made it practical for everyday transactions, a handful of grain here, a modest piece of labor there, all exchanged against the soft shine of silver weighed to the shekel standard. But first, a slow little detour. For this extra interesting fact. The shekel's very name comes from the Akkadian root sakalu, meaning to weigh, reminding us that the act of weighing was so central to its identity that the word itself became the measure. Over centuries, the shekel would evolve into a coin, stamped and circulated, but in these early days it was simpler, quieter, more tactile, a measure that asked only for balance, for the calm settling of weight against weight. There is nothing thrilling in this picture, only the soft rhythm of trade, the patient watching of scales until equality is found. And yet, it is that very ordinariness that makes it feel so peacefully enduring. And as we flow still further, we find ourselves before the talent, a measure both vast and weighty, emerging around 2200 BCE in Mesopotamia. Unlike the shekel, which was small and light, the talent was a unit of bulk, about 30 to 35 kilograms in mass, equivalent to around 3,600 shekels. To speak of a talent was to speak of significant wealth, often in silver or copper, a weight not easily carried in a single hand but requiring strong arms or perhaps even beasts of burden. Imagine a great slab of metal or a carefully measured heap, heavy and inert, resting on a platform scale. The talent was less a coin of exchange than a statement of wealth, a measure used in accounting for royal treasuries, temple offerings, or the wages of entire groups of laborers. The mathematics were deliberate, with the shekel at the small end, the mina in the middle, and the talent at the top, forming a quiet pyramid of weight that ordered the Mesopotamian economy. To owe a talent was no simple matter, it was a burden, a weight felt in body and in numbers. Yet even here, in this heavy measure, there is a kind of tranquility, for the talent was consistent, dependable, repeating across centuries with slight regional variations but always retaining its role as a cornerstone of weight. One might picture scribes scratching down numbers on clay tablets, pressing their reeds into soft surfaces, recording that so many talents of silver had been given or received. Nothing exciting, nothing quick, just the slow accounting of mass, the quiet acknowledgement of how much could rest, unmoving, in one place. And in that weight, there is calmness, a gravity not only of matter but of meaning. Softly, let us drift into the quiet chambers of Nippur around 2100 BC, where a rod of stone or metal lay carefully guarded, serving as the standard cubit of the land. This cubit of Nippur, discovered by archaeologists long after its use, was around 51.85 centimeters in length and stood as a precise anchor in a world where measurements so often depended on the human body. Imagine the temple officials, scribes, and builders approaching this sacred rod when disputes arose, using it as the unquestionable truth against which all lesser rods and strings must be compared. The cubit of Nippur was not only a tool, but a symbol of cosmic and civic order, resting in the temple as if divinely sanctioned. Each mark etched upon it spoke of subdivisions, palms and fingers carefully delineated, transforming the human forearm into a universal guide. But first, a slow little detour. To notice how fascinatingly mundane this is, a stick of fixed length, kept safe, consulted in moments of uncertainty. And yet, this dull artifact gave temples their symmetry, homes their walls, and cities their straight roads. The very act of trusting a rod more than a human arm reveals the slow shift from organic approximation to standardized control. One can almost hear the silence of the storeroom where the cubit was kept, undisturbed, while outside the world rose, brick by brick, in measured harmony. With a gentle pause, we drift to ancient Israel around 2000 BC, where the log quietly held its place as a unit of liquid capacity. About 0.3 liters in volume, the log was small, modest, barely more than a single cup of water or oil. Its scale made it a measure not of grandeur but of intimacy, the size that might fill a handheld vessel or be poured carefully into a cooking pot. The log appears in biblical and rabbinic texts, reminding us that this unassuming quantity had meaning in ritual as well as daily sustenance. Priests might measure oil in logs for offerings, and households might use it for food preparation, ensuring consistency across families and generations. To us, it may seem barely worth naming, a third of a liter, a fraction of a modern bottle, but to them, it was an agreed-upon truth, precise enough to structure their world. The word itself, log, likely connected to roots meaning to measure or container, reinforcing its role as a vessel-sized unit. It was small enough to embody personal ritual yet large enough to matter in economic transactions. In its very smallness lies its beauty, for the log reminds us that systems of order are built not only on grand units but on these humble, cup-like measures that echo through texts and traditions. Now, with the slow weight of sand drifting through an unseen hourglass, we arrive at the Omer, around 1900 BC, in ancient Israel. The Omer was a dry capacity measure, about 2.2 liters, large enough to hold a generous serving of grain or flour, yet small enough to be managed in daily life. The Omer is most remembered in biblical contexts, particularly in the story of manna, the mysterious food said to sustain the Israelites in the desert, where each person gathered exactly 1 Omer per day. This detail transformed a simple unit of grain into a spiritual rhythm, binding nourishment to measurement, and making the Omer not just a container but a covenantal symbol. In practical terms, it was a tenth of an ephah, part of a larger system that divided and connected measures with great care. Imagine a family scooping grain into a vessel marked by tradition, filling it to the quiet brim, knowing that this exact amount would sustain them. But first, a gentle little detour. To note that 2.2 liters is almost the size of a modern household mixing bowl, a detail that quietly ties the distant past to our present kitchens. The Omer whispers to us not of abundance or shortage, but of sufficiency, a measure of enough, where exactness met survival, and where the mundane act of scooping grain was infused with timeless meaning. And with unhurried ease, we flow to the bath, Around 1800 BC, another unit of ancient Israel, this one devoted to liquid and considerably larger in scale. The bath held about 22 liters, enough to fill a sturdy jar or large container, a vessel of significance for trade, ritual, and domestic use. In biblical accounts, the bath appears as a standard measure for wine and oil, ensuring that when such goods were exchanged or offered, they were understood and trusted. 22 liters, roughly the size of a modern bucket, was neither infinite nor negligible. It was a size that could be carried with effort, stored with care, and poured with reverence. Scholars note that the bath was connected to the ephah, its dry equivalent, creating a balanced symmetry in the system of measures, where grain and liquid could be compared in harmonious proportions. One might imagine clay jars, sealed with wax or cloth, each containing a bath of oil, waiting in storage rooms lined with rows of vessels, their silence broken only by the soft sound of footsteps on packed earth. To think of the bath is to think of weighty vessels lifted slowly, the glugging sound of liquid poured out carefully, the assurance that what was given or received was fair and exact. In its quiet heaviness, the bath was not merely a container but a quiet guardian of balance in trade, ritual, and sustenance, holding order in its rounded clay walls. Softly, as though brushing the surface of a clay jar with fingertips, let us rest upon the measure of the Homer, spoken of around 1700 BCE in ancient Israel. The Homer was a dry capacity of about 220 liters, a vast and weighty measure, its very name suggesting a load that might be carried by a donkey. One might picture an entire harvest's bounty portioned into homers, great heaps of grain, barley, or wheat, counted and recorded by scribes with quiet diligence. Unlike the smaller omer or ephah, which fit into household rhythms, the homer belonged to larger scales, granaries, temple storerooms, and agricultural records. It was, in a sense, the measure of abundance, though not in a dramatic way, rather in the patient rows of clay tablets listing debts and offerings, each marked in homers, tallying a reality of fields and yields. But first, a slow little detour. For this extra interesting fact, the homer was defined as 10 ephahs, and each ephah itself contained 10 omers, a neat structure of tens that gave symmetry to the measuring of sustenance. To hold a homer in mind is to think of sacks stacked patiently, silent against mud brick walls, or to imagine donkeys laden with burdens, each one bearing a measure that was as much about fairness as about food. Though it may seem grand in size, there is still a calm ordinariness in it, just grain, just measure, just a number to whisper balance into the economy of daily survival. Flowing gently onward, we reach the cubit of Babylon around 1600 BC, a rod of length carefully defined at about 49.5 centimeters. Shorter than the Egyptian royal cubit, yet no less important, this standard spoke softly of order in a world where temples, palaces, and canals all required precision. In Babylonia, measures of length were not mere conveniences, but tools of governance, ensuring that building projects aligned, that irrigation channels carried water correctly, and that walls rose straight against the horizon. To think of the cubit of Babylon is to imagine surveyors at work, holding cords or rods against earth and stone, counting their world in increments just shy of half a meter. This length, though modest, carried the authority of standardization, allowing one builder's cubit to be trusted by another, even across time and distance. And there is something gently pleasing in the way such a length could fit into the arm's memory, slightly shorter than the Egyptian measure, yet resting with equal gravity in the mathematics of architecture. The cubit of Babylon tied the human scale to the larger ambitions of kings, quietly reminding all that the vastness of a ziggurat or a canal was ultimately measured through the repetition of one simple unit. Drifting deeper into Egypt around 1500 BC, we meet the Seat, not a measure of length or weight, but a ratio, a quiet calculation of slope that guided the building of pyramids. The Seat described how many horizontal palms equaled the rise of one vertical cubit, a system that translated monumental geometry into the language of simple body-based units. Imagine a builder drawing lines in sand, marking out that for every cubit upward, perhaps 5.5 palms extended outward, defining the angle of a pyramid's face. The Sikh was practical, yet it was also abstract, living in numbers as much as in stone. And yet, there is beauty in how softly it worked, not a formula written with symbols, but a method embodied in rods, strings, and cubits marked in palms and fingers. With it, Egyptians created the precise slopes that gave pyramids their enduring silhouette, a geometry so exact that the angle of Khufu's Great Pyramid remains astonishingly consistent centuries later. But first, a slow little detour. To notice how the Sikh connected daily craft to celestial order, for Egyptians saw harmony in proportions, linking earthly structures to divine balance. The Sikh whispers of slow, thoughtful planning, where each angle was not guessed but measured, not rushed but repeated, until stone by stone, eternity was laid into place. And with unhurried quiet, we move to Mesopotamia around 1450 BC, where the cubit of Gudea rested, inscribed on the statue of the ruler of Lagash. This specialized cubit was carved into the stone itself, a permanent standard that bore witness to the seriousness of accurate length. Measuring about 49.3 centimeters, close to the Babylonian cubit, it was not merely a tool but a monument, a reminder that law and order depended on shared measures. To engrave a cubit on a statue was to say that truth itself could be fixed in stone, unchanging, ever present for craftsmen, merchants, and judges. Imagine touching the cool surface of that statue, running a hand along the carefully marked divisions, each line a silent agreement across society that this, and only this, was the correct length. There is a stillness to this idea, the measure not hidden in a storeroom, but displayed openly, a public truth for all to see. The cubit of Gudea turns measurement into memory, preserving for centuries the quiet insistence that precision matters, even in a world where life flowed unpredictably along the Tigris and Euphrates. And as we glide softly to around 1400 BCE in ancient Israel, we find the gera, a measure so very small, yet indispensable. At about 0.57 grams, the gera was a subdivision of the shekel, 20 of them making up that larger weight. To think of a gera is to think of the tiniest balances of trade and ritual, where even fragments of silver or gold were weighed with care. It was often mentioned in biblical texts, serving as the baseline for temple contributions and ensuring fairness in offerings. One might imagine a merchant adjusting his scale to the faintest weight, watching the beam tilt at the addition of a mere sliver of metal, until the delicate balance was found. But first, a gentle little detour. To reflect on how remarkable it is that societies cared to measure such small amounts, embedding them into law and worship alike. The gera was almost invisible in size, yet in significance it was heavy, for without it the shekel itself would have no foundation. This tiny unit reminds us that systems are built not only on the large and obvious but also on the minute and nearly imperceptible. And in that smallness, in that whisper of weight, there is a certain softness, a quiet steadiness, anchoring value in the gentlest of measures. Quietly resting in the simplest of forms, the unit called the finger appeared across the ancient Near East around 1200 BC. It was nothing more than the width of a single finger, often about 1.9 centimeters in practice, yet this tiny measure carried surprising usefulness. Unlike the larger cubits, which laid out grand temples or palaces, the finger was gentle, intimate, closer to daily life than to monuments. It could guide the making of jewelry, cloth, or delicate woodwork, where small increments mattered most. There is something soothing in how modest it was, no rods, no inscribed tools, only one's own hand, present and available to anyone regardless of wealth or rank. This closeness to the body meant the unit traveled easily across cultures, recognizable and universal, though small variations naturally arose. We can imagine scribes writing down finger breadths of fabric, or craftsmen quietly noting the thickness of stone blocks by counting fingers. And in its unassuming way, the finger shows us how systems of measure grew both upwards and downwards, from large spans of forearms and strides to these delicate little increments. But first, Let us pause with a gentle detour. For there is comfort in realizing how such small measures gave texture to life, reminding us that even the tiniest parts of the body could help order trade, craft, and exchange, grounding societies in something familiar, warm, and universally shared. Flowing gently through biblical tradition, the span around 1100 BCE offered a midpoint of measure, equal to half a cubit, or the stretch of a hand from thumb to little finger. About 22 centimeters in practice, it sat between the finger and the forearm, a quiet bridge linking smallness and reach. Unlike the rigid rods of official cubits, the span lived in the gesture of an open hand, a momentary extension of the body itself. Ancient texts mention spans as measures of height, breadth, or depth, tying them to sacred descriptions and everyday reckoning alike. The beauty lies in how naturally it arises, no calculation, no tool, only the familiar spread of a hand offering a unit both personal and shareable. This made it practical, yet still soft, for it was precise enough to give form to description but not so sharp that it demanded mechanical accuracy. When we imagine priests or scribes reading scrolls aloud, with spans used to describe altars, spaces, or figures, we can feel how it translated abstraction into something bodily and relatable. But first, a quiet little detour. For the span also tells us something about how people layered measures together. A cubit could be halved into spans, spans themselves broken down into finger breadths, and slowly an entire language of fractions unfolded. In this gentle lattice of parts, society found ways to take something as infinite as space and tame it into pieces the hand could hold. Drifting outward into vastness, the Yojana of ancient India around 1000 BCE unfolded on a much grander scale. While fingers and spans measured cloth and beams, the Yojana measured landscapes themselves. In many traditions it stretched between 12 and 15 kilometers, its range large enough to describe journeys, cities, and even mountains. In Indian epics such as the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, the Yojana becomes not just a technical figure but a poetic one, painting pictures of gods, sages, and travelers moving through immense spaces. A mountain could be so many yojanas high, a kingdom so many yojanas wide, and in this rhythm the vastness of geography became imaginable. There is a kind of dreaminess in how the unit balanced between practicality and imagination. Caravans might use it to estimate distance, while storytellers used it to anchor myth in measures that felt human but also celestial. To describe in yojanas was to set boundaries on the unbounded, to put a human scale onto horizons that might otherwise feel infinite. But first, a slow detour worth noticing is how such large units reveal the layering of human perception. Just as fingers built up to cubits, cubits built up to stadia, and yojanas rose even further, stretching into landscapes and myth. In this way, the yojana shows that units were not only mathematical but also cultural, mapping not only roads but imaginations, giving the immeasurable the soft outlines of number. Settling back into intimacy, the Angula of ancient India around 950 BCE returned measurement to the body once again. Defined as the breadth of a single finger, it was usually placed around 1.76 to 1.9 centimeters in texts, mirroring the finger unit elsewhere but folded into the Indian system of harmonized measures. The angula was not just an isolated length but a building block, for from it larger measures unfolded like carefully stacked steps. 24 angulas formed a osta, or cubit, other measures expanded outward in multiples, ensuring a consistent system that could govern construction, ritual, and design. This little unit thus underpinned temples, palaces, and sacred sculpture, ensuring that proportions echoed harmony and order. But first, a soft detour. For it is calming to realize how such measures reflect a philosophy of scaling. From something as tiny as a fingertip, systems could expand outward to embrace columns, courtyards, and entire city plans, yet never lose their link to the human body. The angula, in its humility, reminds us that every towering pillar and grand hall had its origin in something very small, a touch of flesh and bone turned into enduring stone. And in this, one senses how cultures found comfort in grounding their most ambitious creations in the simplest, most familiar span of the body, as if to say, even greatness begins with something we can hold in our hand. There is a gentle steadiness in the measure known as the asta, found in ancient India around 900 BC, a length that drew itself directly from the span of the human body. It was the distance of the forearm, from the elbow to the tip of the middle finger, usually reckoned at about 45 centimeters, though slight variations could occur depending on local practice or tradition. The asta carried with it the softness of familiarity, since every person possessed a forearm, and yet it also carried the strength of order, for it became the backbone of larger systems of measurement. 24 angulas, or finger breadths, were said to form a asta, linking the tiny with the tangible. In this way, an entire architecture of length blossomed upward from the smallest part of the body. We can imagine artisans tracing dimensions of wood or stone by the length of a forearm, priests instructing scribes in the span of cubits and hastes, or builders lifting their arms against walls to ensure proportion. But first, a slow little detour. For it is soothing to remember that the asta was not merely technical but philosophical, often linked in Indian thought to ideas of order, balance, and proportion. Sacred texts referred to measurements in hastes when describing altars, temples, and even statues, ensuring harmony between the human form and divine geometry. In this way, the asta becomes both ordinary and profound, bridging the space between body and structure, between the touch of a single arm and the endurance of timeless monuments. A subtle weight drifts through the karsa, a unit of measure known in ancient India around 850 BC, most often used for gold, grains, or other treasured substances. This was no airy length of space but a palpable heaviness resting lightly in the palm, around 16 radis, translating to roughly 10 grams by modern reckoning. The karsa was nestled within an intricate lattice of Indian weight systems, where radis, karsas, palas, and larger units created a harmonious hierarchy of mass. It was neither the smallest nor the largest, yet it offered a reliable step in the unfolding ladder of trade, accounting, and measurement. One can imagine the careful hands of merchants or scribes, tilting balances, counting grains, or exchanging tiny bits of silver or gold, each delicate weight softly asserting its place in commerce. But first, a gentle pause for a detour. It is comforting to reflect that these measures often drew inspiration from seeds and natural objects. The reti, linked to the uniform gunja seed, multiplied into karsas, bringing both precision and grounding in the natural world. The karsa thus embodies continuity, connecting the rhythms of agriculture, the labor of commerce, and human interaction, translating the tiniest units of nature into the structures of society. Just like a hushed fullness whispers in the drawn, a measure of dry volume in ancient India around 800 BC, equal to about 12 seers or roughly 40 liters. Unlike a finger breadth or a forearm length, the drawn captures the scope of storage, sustenance, and the quiet rituals of harvest. Its name carries a resonance of vessels filled and emptied in cycles of daily life, of granaries holding the yield of fields, of temples and households maintaining rhythm and provision. One can picture jars, baskets, or bins brimming with pulses or grain, each measured not by abstraction but in the soft, tangible count of drins. But first, a slow little detour. It is soothing to notice that the drawn was part of a nested, cascading system, layered above seers and below the karika, creating a vocabulary for both the smallest handful and the greatest storehouse. These layered volumes brought order to food storage, to commerce, and to ritual, harmonizing human need, natural cycles, and the quiet mathematics of daily life. The drawn speaks softly of balance, offering both practicality and rhythm, a gentle reminder that even ordinary substances were measured with care, shaping experience and sustenance alike. A drifting stretch of horizon is captured in the kos, a unit of distance from ancient India around 750 BC, stretching roughly 2 to 3 kilometers depending on local custom. Unlike a cubit or asta, the kos unrolls along the path of the traveler, marking waypoints, villages, or sacred shrines. It is tender to imagine it as the rhythm of footsteps extended, a human-scale horizon that frames how far one might walk before pausing. Ancient texts employed the kos to describe roads, pilgrimages, and royal routes, embedding a sense of scale into the very act of journeying. But first, a soft detour. It is interesting to note that the kos endured through centuries, lingering into medieval times, often marked by stones or pillars that made the measure visible upon the landscape. In this dreamlike way, the kos embodies experience rather than mere abstraction, folding the effort of the body, the cadence of breath, and the steady motion of feet into a measure that shaped both practical travel and imaginative storytelling. Like a gentle expanse stretches in the plethron, a measure from ancient Greece around 700 BC, approximately 30 meters in length, often extending into the calculation of area. It could define the side of a square plot, translating linear measurement into contained, tangible land. In agricultural contexts, it allowed farmers to map fields, set boundaries, and bring order to cultivated earth. Its name flows softly from the Greek plethos, meaning multitude or fullness, echoing the sense of scope the plethron embodies. One can picture surveyors pacing its length, noting markers, tracing edges with careful observation. But first, a slow little detour. It is gentle to recall that the plethron also applied in architecture and athletic spaces, linking earth to structures, farming to ceremony, ground to gathering. In stadiums, for instance, its length might align with tracks, lending rhythm and proportion to contests and assemblies. Thus, the plethron bridges the ordinary and the ceremonial, the soil and the stone, enclosing both space and purpose, translating human activity into structured, lived order. In the quietest gestures of measurement, the dactyl emerges from ancient Greece around 650 BCE, defined by the breadth of a single finger. It holds a subtle presence, almost overlooked, yet essential when repeated or combined into longer lengths. Its delicate scale-guided carved stone, the spacing of inscriptions, and the fine contours of bronze work. But first, a slow little detour. It is comforting to notice that the dactyl simplicity allowed it to function across city-states, remaining familiar even as larger units varied. Sculptors may have paused to measure a finger width, architects aligning multiple dactyls to set rhythm and proportion, quietly connecting the human hand to grand forms of Greek art and architecture. Furthermore, the dactyl often served as the base for poetic and metrical structures in literature, particularly in epic poetry, where rhythm and cadence relied subtly on repeated small measures. Its presence bridges the tangible and the conceptual, guiding not only stone and bronze but also the soft pulse of human expression, a tiny standard lending consistency across art, architecture, and cultural life. Among the measures of stride and reach, the pas, the Greek foot, offers a gentle, human-scaled span, known around 600 BCE and varying between roughly 29 and 34 centimeters depending on local custom. Unlike the intimate dactyl, the pas extends across space, linking the movement of the body to the design of buildings, roads, and market layouts. But first, a slow little detour. It is quietly fascinating that no two city-states defined it exactly alike, yet with careful scaling, the pas remained practical and functional. Builders and surveyors might step it out across stone or soil, setting walls or marking boundaries, each step soft and deliberate, bridging human reach with civic order. In addition, the pas provided a flexible foundation for architectural proportions, enabling columns, steps, and platforms to align harmoniously within temples and public spaces. Its measurement harmonized human motion with constructed spaces, ensuring that architecture felt natural and scaled to lived experience, gently tying human dimensions to the urban and ceremonial landscapes that framed everyday life. In the domain of abundance and sustenance, the medimnos speaks softly, a dry volume unit from ancient Greece around 580 BCE, containing roughly 52 liters. It measures grain, pulses, and provisions, large enough to sustain households, temples, and marketplaces, yet still tangible and manageable. But first, a gentle pause. It is calming to consider how standardization of the medimnos overcame the variety of containers in use, from clay amphorae to woven baskets, each adjusted to approximate this measure. One can imagine grains flowing slowly into vessels, counted with care, ensuring rations and offerings were fair. Through the medimnos, Greek society established a quiet vocabulary for sufficiency and abundance, linking labor, civic responsibility, and ritual into the everyday rhythm of life. Moreover, the medimnos connected with smaller units such as the kenics and larger measures like the myriados, forming a nested hierarchy of volume that allowed precise planning of storage, taxation, and distribution, so that even in complex systems of provisioning, a single medimnos retained its quiet, tangible presence. Across the small, deliberate units of trade, the obol presents itself, a weight of ancient Greece around 560 BC, tiny at approximately 0.72 grams yet potent in silver coinage and daily commerce. It reminds us that even the smallest measures could carry significance, linking metal, trust, and social exchange. But first, a slow little detour. It is soothing to notice that obols accumulated naturally into larger denominations, such as the drachma, forming a nested hierarchy that made trade practical. Merchants might weigh these coins carefully on delicate scales, observing balance, ensuring conformity. The obol, light and subtle, demonstrates how minute units can ripple through the economic and social structures of a community, quietly anchoring human systems of value. Additionally, obols appeared not only in commerce but in ritual offerings, votive gifts, and funerary deposits, lending them a symbolic as well as practical function. Their consistency and integration into monetary systems illustrates a meticulous attention to small details, a careful reflection of trust, fairness, and social cohesion in the bustling microcosms of Greek markets. Within the spaces between small coinage and large aggregates, the mina appears, a measured weight of ancient Greece around 540 BC, roughly 436 grams, bridging obols and talents. It served as a practical standard in trade, taxation, and accounting, substantial enough to be meaningful yet still manageable for hands. But first, a slow little detour. It is gentle to observe how the mina integrated into larger frameworks, 60 minas composing a talent, tying human touch to broader economic structures. In marketplaces or treasuries, workers might weigh each mina, stacking them, noting their balance, performing a quiet choreography of measurement. The mina teaches us that weight, like length or volume, can form a gentle framework, supporting fairness, continuity, and the invisible architecture of society. Furthermore, minas played a role in state finance and military provisioning, connecting individual merchants to large-scale taxation systems, troop payments, and the storage of silver and civic treasuries. In this way, the mina quietly knit together personal handling, civic responsibility, and economic stability into one harmonious, measured rhythm of Greek life. A gentle sense of value rests in the stater, a coin and weight unit circulating in ancient Greece around 520 BC, typically weighing between 12 and 14 grams. It is a small measure, yet it carries significance far beyond its modest heft, linking commerce, trust, and civic life. But first, a slow little detour. For it is comforting to notice that the stater's weight and consistency were carefully maintained to ensure fairness in trade, whether in markets, temples, or long-distance transactions. We may imagine merchants holding the coin in soft, deliberate hands, observing its balance, comparing it against small scales, and calculating exchange with quiet precision. The stater also interacted naturally with smaller denominations, such as the drachma and obol, forming a gently nested system of value that allowed both micro and macro trade to coexist seamlessly. Beyond daily commerce, staters sometimes traveled across the Mediterranean, their consistent weight carrying the quiet authority of Greek city-states into distant ports, connecting economies, cultures, and human interactions through a tiny piece of silver. In its unassuming form, the stator demonstrates how meticulous attention to weight and material created order, trust, and continuity across human experience, and how even the smallest coin could serve as a bridge between individual hands and the larger structures of society. There is a soft, liquid fullness in the amphora, a vessel of ancient Greece around 500 BC, holding approximately 26 liters, shaped not only for storage but for graceful handling. Unlike small coins or hand measures, the amphora measured substance itself, olive oil, wine, or water, capturing the rhythm of human consumption, storage, and trade. But first, a slow little detour. For it is fascinating to notice that the amphora's shape was standardized with careful attention to volume, weight, and handling, so that merchants, sailors, and storekeepers could count and transport goods efficiently without frequent recalculation. Visualizing a row of amphorae resting gently along a dock, we can sense the quiet precision of their volume, the soft thud of a vessel set carefully in place, and the symmetry of countless similar forms arranged for inventory. Beyond trade, amphorae often carried symbolic or ceremonial meaning, marking offerings or gifts, where their size and measured capacity became a bridge between practicality and ritual observance. In this way, the amphora quietly unites human labor, measurement, and cultural practice, a tangible vessel of organization, order, and the soft flow of daily life. A hushed, daily rhythm is captured in the choinix, a unit of dry volume from ancient Greece around 480 BCE, roughly equal to 1 liter and often used to measure daily grain rations. Its modest size ties it directly to sustenance, to the slow cadence of eating, baking, and household provisioning, small enough to manage yet essential for everyday life. But first, a slow little detour. It is comforting to notice that the choinix was part of a carefully layered system, linking smaller measures with larger units like the medimnos, allowing families, markets, and civic authorities to plan and distribute food with precision. We may picture grains spilling softly into bowls or baskets, counted, measured, and allotted with meticulous care, the gentle clinking of vessels marking the pace of sustenance. In its humble form, the choinix embodies the quiet intersection of human need, social order, and agricultural management, a constant presence in the rhythms of domestic life, reminding us that even the smallest measures, handled attentively, shape continuity and fairness in the most ordinary aspects of living. There is a grand, weighty presence in the Attic talent, a substantial measure from ancient Greece around 460 BC, totaling roughly 26 kilograms, bridging small coinage and large aggregates in commerce and tribute. Its considerable heft made it significant for trade, taxation, and storage, a measure that spoke to both human hands and state-level economies. But first, a slow little detour. It is soothing to notice that the talent integrated seamlessly with smaller units, such as minas and obols, creating a hierarchy that allowed vast wealth to be measured with accessible, human-scaled tools. Picture accountants, treasurers, or merchants arranging talents carefully on scales, noting each mass, ensuring accurate accounting, and connecting physical weight to abstract value. The talent's presence extends beyond the marketplace into political, ceremonial, and economic life, silently linking individual effort to collective resources, while its standardized weight provides a stable reference across regions and generations. In its quiet, deliberate way, the Attic talent reveals how meticulous attention to mass shaped not only commerce but also the social and civic fabric, harmonizing the tangible with the systemic in ancient Greek society. A soft, linear measure stretches into space with the Roman cubit, known around 440 BC, standardized at approximately 44.4 centimeters, reflecting the forearm from elbow to fingertip. It was a unit of both practical construction and symbolic order, guiding walls, columns, and inscriptions with human proportion. But first, a slow little detour. It is comforting to notice that the Roman cubit's consistency allowed builders across the growing republic to harmonize temples, aqueducts, and homes with shared understanding, even as local variations sometimes persisted. Visualize architects and laborers holding rods, comparing spans, measuring stone, and aligning structures with a gentle, careful rhythm. The cubit bridges the intimate scale of the human body with the monumental ambitions of Roman engineering, linking natural proportion to civic architecture. Its presence whispers a quiet lesson in continuity, that measurement, rooted in human form, provides a stable thread through labor, construction, and the rhythm of everyday life, quietly weaving order across space, time, and the structures of civilization. A quiet, measured step echoes in the Roman foot, a standard of length used around 420 BC, stretching approximately 29.6 centimeters. It carries a tangible presence, neither fleeting nor grandiose, yet profoundly practical, bridging the space between human motion and architectural design. But first, a slow little detour. It is soothing to notice how the Roman foot was applied so widely across roads, buildings, and aqueducts, creating a subtle harmony that linked distant cities through consistent human-scaled measurement. One can imagine surveyors pacing carefully along cobblestones or foundations, aligning stones and columns with the gentle rhythm of steps, each footfall translating the human body into spatial order. The foot also became a modular unit, divisible and combinable, forming the basis for longer measures while remaining intimately familiar to the builder's hand. Through this soft, bodily reference, the Roman foot connects private experience with public works, allowing citizens, laborers, and architects to share a consistent sense of scale. Its quiet reliability whispers through centuries, an invisible thread holding together the geometry of daily life, the rhythm of construction, and the subtle poetry of urban planning, reminding us that measurement often grows from the body before it stretches into empire. A delicate fraction of length rests in the Roman uncia, emerging around 400 BCE as an inch length, precisely 1/12 of the Roman foot. It is small, intimate, and quietly essential, a unit that allows subtle refinement in measurement and construction. But first, a slow little detour. It is gentle to notice that the uncia not only provided exactness for architectural work but also informed the making of coins, metalwork, and tools, where precision was critical. Craftsmen could measure, carve, or cast with the uncia as a guide, subdividing the familiar foot into easily graspable increments. The uncia's presence reminds us that even in a vast republic, tiny units carried authority, translating abstract numbers into physical space and controlled proportions. Visualize artisans holding rulers, noting fractions of a foot, checking angles and curves, their careful gestures quietly ensuring that walls, beams, and instruments aligned in harmonious relation. In its subtle, understated way, the uncia connects the intimate, human-scaled experience to the broader sweep of Roman design, allowing both macro and micro structures to coexist in careful balance, linking craft, architecture, and daily life in measured grace. In the soft, domestic realm of Roman life, the sextarius appears around 380 BCE, a liquid measure of roughly 0.55 liters, carrying the gentle rhythm of daily sustenance. It flows through kitchens, markets, and banquets alike, marking quantities of wine, oil, or water with practical intimacy. But first, a slow little detour. It is comforting to note that the sextarius was part of a hierarchical system of measurement, divisible into smaller units like the cythus, while stacking into larger measures such as the kingius. Households, traders, and innkeepers relied on it for both practicality and fairness, gently coordinating supplies, recipes, and allocations. Imagine clay or metal cups carefully filled and leveled, the quiet sound of liquid meeting vessel echoing in open courtyards or shaded kitchens. The sextarius, though modest, structured the rhythm of consumption and distribution, anchoring daily life in consistent, tactile experience. In this way, it bridges the intimate scale of human use with civic and economic systems, reminding us that even the simplest measures carry a soft authority, shaping social and domestic interaction with precision and care. A fuller, more substantial flow is captured in the kingius, a Roman liquid measure from around 360 BC, holding approximately 3.3 liters. It speaks to generosity, storage, and trade, moving gracefully between households, markets, and public provisioning. But first, a slow little detour. It is intriguing to note that the Congeus could be subdivided into sextarii, allowing both flexibility and consistency in the management of water, wine, or oil. Picture attendants filling amphorae or jars carefully, noting levels, balancing volume with human touch, the quiet movement of liquid a reflection of the meticulous attention that underpinned Roman practicality. Its generous size made it suitable for transport and distribution, while still traceable back to smaller units, forming a coherent hierarchy of volume. The Congeus embodies the gentle intertwining of human need, measurement, and civic order, a flowing presence that regulates both domestic and commercial life with soft authority. The modius, emerging in Rome around 340 BCE, offers a dry capacity of about 8.7 liters, bridging the world of grain, flour, and other staples with organized storage and commerce. It is modest yet meaningful, a container that both quantifies and communicates sustenance. But first, a slow little detour. It is calming to observe that the modius fit into a layered system of measures, from the smaller sextarius to larger multiples, ensuring fairness in distribution and standardization across markets, temples, and households. We can envision merchants and clerks gently leveling grain, observing quantity, and recording counts with meticulous care, translating abstract numbers into concrete, practical application. The modius embodies the quiet rhythm of domestic life, trade, and civic responsibility, reminding us that measurement is not only about numbers but about the tactile, deliberate gestures that connect people to resources, to each other, and to the sustaining structures of society, flowing softly through the daily and the monumental alike. Softly resting in the hands and ledgers of ancient merchants, the Romanes emerges around 320 BC, a unit of weight and coinage originally around 327 grams. It carries both material substance and social significance, bridging the tactile world of metal with the rhythms of trade, taxation, and civic accounting. But first, a slow little detour. For it is gentle to note how these began as a bronze cast, gradually evolving in weight and material across centuries, yet remaining a reliable anchor in economic life. One can imagine merchants weighing in as carefully on small scales, noting its heft, counting multiples, or exchanging it in marketplaces where coin and conversation intertwined. Beyond its physicality, the as carries a quiet narrative. It links the labor of minting, the judgment of authorities, and the everyday movements of Roman citizens, all within a single, manageable unit. Its presence reminds us that even in a sprawling republic, weight and value could be grounded in something small, human-scaled, and materially tangible, where each coin was not merely metal but a measured connection between people, resources, and the structures of society, moving softly through hands, pockets, and treasuries alike, embodying both economy and trust in its gentle heft. Across open fields and cultivated soil, the jugrum stretches softly into view, an area measure of Rome around 300 BC, roughly 0.25 hectares, marking plots of land, gardens, and fields with gentle geometry. Unlike units of weight or coin, it unfolds across the landscape, linking human labor to earth, cultivation, and time. But first, a slow little detour. It is calming to notice that the jugrum was derived from the area a pair of oxen could plow in a single day, anchoring measurement to lived experience and the rhythms of agricultural life. Surveyors and land managers might pace the field, laying ropes or rods to mark boundaries, observing shadows, and feeling the earth beneath their feet. In this way, the jugrum is not merely a number but a reflection of effort, of time, of the body moving in synchrony with the soil. Its quiet geometry transforms plots of land into systems of ownership, taxation, and cultivation, allowing Rome to weave the human, the agricultural, and the administrative into a gently measured order, a rhythm of work, law, and sustenance quietly embedded in the landscape itself. Softly attuned to local bodies and custom, the pes drusinus appears in northern provinces around 280 BCE, a Roman length of roughly 33.3 centimeters, especially noted in Gallic regions. It carries a gentle adjustment to regional practice, a stretch of the foot accommodating local variation while still connecting to broader Roman standards. But first, a slow little detour. It is fascinating to observe that the pes drusinus illustrates how Roman measures were both uniform and adaptable, bridging imperial edicts with local custom. Builders might pace it out in timber, stone, or road foundations, noting subtle differences that allowed structures to harmonize across diverse territories. The pes drusinus embodies a quiet balance between consistency and variation, where human proportions, practical needs, and administrative oversight all converge, making measurements simultaneously precise, flexible, and tactile. In its subtle way, this foot also links ordinary labor to governance, architecture, and trade, reflecting how even small increments could ripple into larger social and structural patterns throughout the provinces. In the steady flow of commerce and calculation, the libra, or Roman pound, emerges around 260 BCE, weighing about 327 grams and serving as a foundational standard for trade, coinage, and accounting. It is substantial, tangible, and reliable, linking silver, bronze, and other materials to daily life. But first, a slow little detour. It is gentle to notice that the libra formed the basis for smaller subdivisions, such as the uncia, allowing both precision and flexibility in exchange and measurement. Merchants, artisans, and magistrates could weigh coins, grain, or other commodities with care, observing balance and consistency. The libra quietly anchors the entire hierarchy of Roman weight, connecting human hands to larger economic and social structures, and providing a material rhythm that underpins both domestic and civic life. Its steady presence also illustrates the interplay between practicality and standardization, showing how the careful management of units could maintain fairness, reliability, and shared understanding across the vast Roman world. Nestled in the span of fingers, the digitus, a Roman finger breadth of around 240 BC, offers a soft, human-scaled measure, precise yet intimately familiar. Unlike broader units, it draws directly from the body, easily grasped and repeated. But first, a slow little detour. It is soothing to consider that the digitus could multiply into inches, feet, or cubits, becoming a building block for construction, design, and everyday calculation. Craftsmen may have used it to gauge small lengths, align tools, or mark inscriptions, each gesture quietly linking the personal scale of the hand to the larger framework of architecture, trade, and measurement. The digitus exemplifies how the smallest units carry weight far beyond their physical dimension, bridging human experience, practicality, and the emergent structures of Roman society. In its softness, it reminds us that even the tiniest gestures of measurement can inform monumental works, where the proportion of a hand gently shapes columns, inscriptions, and the invisible architecture of civic and domestic life. Softly stretching across the tactile world of Roman measurement, the pomus emerges around 220 BCE, a gentle handbreadth of about 7.4 centimeters. It carries the intimacy of the body, a measure small enough to be held in a single hand yet quietly capable of underpinning larger systems of proportion. But first, a slow little detour. For it is soothing to notice how the pomus connected directly to human anatomy, grounding Roman architecture, craft, and trade in scales easily remembered and repeated. Builders may have placed their palms along timber, brick, or stone to mark incremental distances, artisans using it to measure material for tools, clothing, or inscriptions. The pomus exemplifies how measurement begins in the body before radiating outward into urban planning, construction, and daily life. In a marketplace or workshop, the pomus could translate into multiple fingers, half feet, or cubits, gently linking the smallest gestures to grander structures. One can imagine the rhythm of hands moving along a surface, each breath recording subtle geometry, each measurement an echo of human touch. Its quiet presence reminds us that even the tiniest span of flesh carries significance, harmonizing the corporeal and the practical, the intimate and the civic, in a softly ordered system of Roman measurement that extends gently through both space and time. Drifting across the steppes of Roman streets and fields, the Gradus appears around 200 BC, a pace of roughly 74 centimeters, linking the natural rhythm of the body to the organized world of measurement. Unlike the hand-bound pomace, the Gradus unfolds in motion, the deliberate step of foot meeting earth, translating movement into standardized space. But first, a slow little detour. For it is quietly fascinating that the Gradus reflected the stride of an average adult, serving as both unit and guide for military marches, surveying land, and laying out roads. Soldiers, surveyors, and architects alike might count paces across fields or foundations, noting slight variations but maintaining consistency, each step soft and deliberate. In this gentle repetition, the Gradus transforms human locomotion into spatial order, harmonizing bodily experience with civic planning. From camp to city, the pace becomes a thread that stitches together distance, effort, and oversight, and through its measured rhythm, we glimpse how Roman systems valued the human scale even as they spanned territories, connecting stride, structure, and social organization in one quietly flowing unit. Among cultivated lands and gently divided plots, the Actus arises around 180 BCE, a land measure of roughly 120 Roman feet, encompassing fields, pastures, and estates. Its presence is both expansive and human-scaled, translating the abstraction of geometry into practical divisions of property and agricultural planning. But first, a soft detour. It is calming to notice how the Actus tied the human body and its stride to the soil, marking spaces that could be plowed, sown, or grazed with precision. Surveyors and land managers might pace its boundaries, stretching ropes, noting shadows, and sensing the earth beneath their feet. The Actus reflects a quiet balance between measurement and experience, ensuring that each plot of land fits within systems of taxation, ownership, and civic organization. In its gentle arithmetic, the measure reveals the interplay of geometry, human labor, and governance, converting tactile perception into enduring order. Its presence whispers of the intimacy between people and land, where every footstep, every rod, and every boundary carries the soft imprint of life, work, and communal structure across the Roman countryside. Flowing from stadiums to roadways, the furlong, or Latinized stadion, emerges around 160 BC, stretching roughly 185 meters, a unit both practical and ceremonial. It softly traces distances across fields, tracks, and competitions, folding human activity into organized space. But first, a slow little detour. For it is comforting to reflect that the furlong preserved ancient Greek and local measurements while adapting them to Roman contexts, providing continuity amid evolving standards. Spectators, athletes, and surveyors could feel the rhythm of the furlong in their movements, whether pacing the track or mapping the countryside. Its length connects competition, travel, and planning, allowing distance to be experienced bodily and conceptually. In this gentle unspooling, the furlong becomes more than a number, it captures cadence, measurement, and human participation, turning motion and observation into a flowing dialogue between body, earth, and society, where precision and experience harmonize softly along every stretch. Woven from steps and time, the Roman mile emerges around 140 BC, defined as 1,000 paces, or approximately 1,480 meters, a measure bridging daily movement with larger journeys. It carries both the authority of standardized distance and the intimacy of individual effort, each pace contributing to the total. But first, a slow little detour. It is intriguing to consider that the mile translated the human act of walking into civic and military logistics, guiding roads, post stations, and travel across provinces. Surveyors might pace long stretches, soldiers march in careful rhythm, travelers feeling the measure in their own steps. The mile unites individual experience with imperial planning, linking the corporeal, the architectural, and the administrative into one continuous flow. Its gentle cadence reminds us that even vast measures are built from small gestures, where every footfall contributes to the mapping, governance, and cohesion of the Roman world, softly harmonizing human effort and spatial understanding. Carrying the weight of commerce and diplomacy, the Roman talent appears around 120 BCE, weighing approximately 32.3 kilograms, a substantial measure of metal, goods, and economic exchange. Its heft signifies both value and effort, tangible in hands yet expansive in its societal implications. But first, a slow little detour. For it is quietly fascinating that the talent functioned as a bridge between large-scale trade, taxation, and storage, forming part of a carefully structured hierarchy of weight that included the libra and smaller subdivisions. Merchants, treasurers, and magistrates might weigh talents, stack them in storage, or calculate totals for exchange, each gesture deliberate and mindful. In this measure, one feels the layering of economy, authority, and human activity, where weight becomes a rhythm that supports trust, accountability, and shared understanding. The Roman talent reminds us that even the largest units of measure, though seemingly abstract, are always grounded in physical reality, human labor, and careful observation, moving softly through marketplaces, granaries, and hands alike, connecting materiality with societal structure in a gentle continuum. A gentle ripple of measurement appears in the Roman quartarius around 100 BCE, a liquid unit of roughly 0.27 liters, softly capturing the flow of wine, oil, or other everyday substances. Its modest capacity connects directly to domestic life, kitchens, and taverns, offering a sense of intimacy within the broader currents of commerce and consumption. But first, a slow little detour. For it is comforting to notice that the quartarius often nested within larger measures, such as the congeus, creating a quietly harmonious system of volume that allowed both precision and flexibility. One can imagine liquid being poured into small vessels, the gentle rise and fall of fluid marking not only quantity but also attention, care, and habit. Merchants, innkeepers, and householders would rely on the quartarius to ration, sell, or prepare ingredients, its measured scale softening the potential chaos of daily life into ordered patterns. In its modest flow, the quartarius reflects the human desire to tame fluidity, to convert the movement of liquids into a tangible, shared rhythm, connecting the small gestures of pouring with the larger structures of society, economy, and culture, quietly anchoring Roman understanding of capacity and distribution in the familiar, bodily scaled act of measurement. Its presence whispers of care, habit, and continuity, a gentle current flowing through homes and marketplaces alike. Across cups, amphorae, and domestic vessels, the acetabulum emerges around 80 BCE, a small Roman liquid measure of approximately 0.07 liters, delicate and precise. It holds the intimacy of a single sip or a measured ingredient, bridging the body's capacity with the abstractions of trade and recipe. But first, a slow little detour. It is intriguing to note that the acetabulum, though tiny, played a practical role in kitchens, workshops, and laboratories, often used to measure spices, medicines, or small quantities of oil and wine. Craftsmen, cooks, and apothecaries would dip, pour, and weigh with attention, allowing the small vessel to shape experience as much as quantity. The acetabulum's charm lies in its human-scaled immediacy, connecting the minutiae of daily practice to the broader systems of Roman volume, scaling seamlessly into larger units while remaining tactile and personal. One can picture careful hands balancing it on a surface, pouring precisely to avoid waste, each gesture forming a rhythm that harmonizes attention, economy, and habit. In this delicate measure, the grand and the intimate meet, reminding us that even the smallest units carry the imprint of human life, a quiet touch of order within the flow of liquids that nourished, lubricated, and enlivened daily existence. Flowing gently through households and marketplaces, the Roman hymena appears around 60 BCE, another liquid measure of roughly 0.27 liters, soft in capacity yet significant in practical use. Its volume mirrors the quartarius, yet in context, it is often tied more directly to culinary, ritual, or medicinal applications, a measure that softly structures routine. But first, a slow little detour. It is soothing to notice that the hymena, like other Roman liquid units, nested within a carefully interlinked hierarchy, where Congius, Sextarius, and Cyathus all relate harmoniously, allowing users to scale amounts with ease. One can imagine domestic tasks, apothecary preparations, or libations being poured with quiet deliberation, each measure linking tactile sensation to social and ritualized expectation. In kitchens or temples, the hymena conveys not just volume, but intention and care, harmonizing measurement with the ebb and flow of daily life. Its soft, flowing presence demonstrates how liquid could be quantified in a way that felt natural, human-scaled, and repeatable, bridging bodily experience, domestic order, and broader civic patterns, creating continuity between the simple act of pouring and the vast architecture of Roman measurement and habit. In the realm of delicate commerce and culinary exactitude, the Roman sextula arises around 40 BCE, a tiny weight of approximately 4.5 grams, subtle yet meaningful. Its diminutive presence anchors the careful handling of spices, metals, and ingredients, providing precision for transactions and preparation alike. But first, a slow little detour. It is gently fascinating that such small measures fit seamlessly into broader Roman systems of weight, where multiples could sum to libra, uncia, or talent, allowing flexibility and precision in tandem. Merchants and artisans might balance a sextula on delicate scales, observing subtle shifts, ensuring consistency and fairness, each tiny mass a testament to attentive practice. In this quiet intimacy, the sextula embodies the principle that even the smallest weights contribute materially and socially, carrying meaning far beyond their gram. It softens abstract calculation into tactile action, making the invisible arithmetic of exchange palpable, bodily, and experiential, and demonstrates the continuity of human care, labor, and attention across the ebb and flow of commerce, production, and domestic life. Across the landscapes of Judea around 20 BC, the cubit of Herod quietly extends the lineage of Egyptian and Roman cubits, slightly differing in length yet carrying the same authority and utility. It was central to construction projects under Herodian rule, from fortifications to palaces, linking architectural vision to human-scaled measure. But first, a slow little detour. For it is soothing to observe that this Herodian cubit, while subtly longer or shorter than Roman or local variants, maintained a harmony with existing traditions, allowing builders, architects, and overseers to work with both precision and familiarity. One can picture measuring rods pressed against stone, aligning walls, and tracing sacred spaces, each cubit a blend of human proportion, ritual expectation, and technical requirement. In its quiet stretch, the cubit of Herod embodies a delicate balance between standardization and adaptation, between bodily scale and monumental ambition, reminding us that measurement, while abstract in concept, always resonates softly with the touch, sight, and experience of those who use it. Its presence whispers of craft, care, and continuity, knitting human hands, architectural aspiration, and historical context into a gently ordered whole. And as the stones of ancient walls settle in the mind's eye, the weight of measurement softens, dissolving from rigid lines into quiet rhythms. Each cubit, each rod, each careful step across a foundation begins to feel less like a number and more like a gesture, a touch, a breath. The hand that held the rod, the foot that paced the ground, and the eye that traced the walls all drift together into a gentle harmony, a rhythm of human care meeting the stillness of space. But first, a slow little detour. For it is comforting to sense that even the grandest constructions, measured and scaled across centuries, eventually fade into the same hush that surrounds us now, reminding us that all precision, all labor, all order ultimately folds into the soft cadence of lived experience. And in this gentle dissolving, we find ourselves ready to close our eyes, letting the measured world settle, carrying its quiet into our own breath, and letting the softest stories drift like feathers toward rest. If your eyes are closed, if your thoughts are drifting, then my job here is done for today. Thank you for spending this unremarkable moment with me. You have listened to The Sleepy Sloth. where uninteresting things become the softest lullabies.